Hi everyone, welcome to Open Democracy's weekly live discussion. My name is Sunny Hundal. I'm social media editor at Open Democracy. At Open Democracy, we want to challenge power and inspire change. We're a global media outlet. I should point that out as well. Why we're here? We're here today because a lot of people in recent weeks have said, and in some cases dismissed corporate statements on Black Lives Matter as gimmicks or stunts. And so the question is our necessary debate on racism getting sidetracked by a culture war? At Open Democracy, we wanted to host a thoughtful and forward-looking debate. And before we get into that, just a few housekeeping rules. We want this conversation to involve you. So all those people who have submitted questions, thank you for that. We're going to try and address them. Henry will do that. If you're joining us on Zoom, and if you have a question or a comment, please click on the chat icon below at the bottom of your screen and type into the chat window. If you're joining us from Facebook, add your input there and we will try and feed it back into the discussion. This is an experiment. There may be kids or pets interrupting us. We're all in lockdown, so just keep that in mind. With that, I'm going to leave you with Henry Bonsu. Henry is a broadcaster who's worked with some of UK's biggest current affairs shows, including BBC Radio 4's Today programme. He's a regular pundit on Channel 5's Jeremy Vine show, BBC News Briefing, and MSNBC's Joy Reid show. Henry, on to you.
Sonny, thank you very much, and greetings to all of you joining us around the world. It's lovely to see so many people posting messages and hollering at us. Even from Kenya, I see one particular person, so thank you very much. Somebody else in Salford. It's wonderful to have the Open Democracy family joining us this Thursday afternoon stroke evening. So I'll introduce the panel in just a moment. Maybe you can see their lovely smiling faces looking at you via Zoom. So a moment though, to reflect on the question, is gesture politics hindering progress against racism? Just think about the explosion we've had in the debate on structural, very specifically structural racism in recent weeks, but that's been accompanied by corporate statements and blackouts on social media, and Blackout Tuesday, and even senior politicians taking the knee, though not notably the Foreign Secretary. Now, some people say these gestures are a major breakthrough, but many activists say they are meaningless and will lead to little change. So let's get into it with our panel, who have accumulated decades of experience in the world of politics, the media, social research, and race relations. They are Evadney Campbell, Managing Director and co-founder of Shiloh PR, which is a media, she's smiling, a media consultancy. She's a former BBC broadcast journalist. She was awarded an MBE, my word, 26 years ago now, Evadney, for her services to the African and Caribbean communities in Gloucester. Welcome to you, Evadney. We also have Sunder Katwala, who's Director of British Future, a think tank on identity and integration. He's a former General Secretary of the Fabian Society and a columnist in a range of publications. And we have Sayeeda Warsi, Baroness Warsi, member of the House of Lords, Pro-Vice Chancellor at Bolton University, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, and author of The Enemy Within, A Tale of Muslim Britain. So panel, thank you very much for joining us. Let's get some opening thoughts. We've had dramatic gestures in recent weeks. I mentioned one or two already. Premier League footballers, cricketers, Formula One drivers, the paddock taking the knee. And I'm just wondering, I'm going to start off with you, Evadney. Which of these gestures, or one that I haven't mentioned, has caught your eye and made you think, that's really interesting?
Well, for me, Henry, as a former BBC broadcast journalist, I have to refer to BBC's 100 million that is put aside for diversity. I am going to be quite cynical about that. And that is because, having been in the BBC and associated with the BBC for over 30 years, I have been there when we have had endless schemes and endless, just various projects that the BBC have launched, and in particular with a remit to tackling diversity. And so I'm disappointed that this is what they've now come out with during this particular period. And hot on the heels, or either the other way around, but they literally just announced shake-up of regional programs. Now, we know that most of the BBC's regional programs have had a 2 or 3 hour slot aimed at the Black and other ethnic minority communities within those regions, and they are very much in the aim of being chopped through this reorganization. So I would be really interested in knowing, what is this 100 million going to be doing? And is it just yet another gesture from the BBC? So for me, I have to bring that one in.
Well, I saw that June Sapong, who is now the diversity supremo at the BBC, was very pleased about the announcement. A number of other people, you laughed cynically, were pleased with it. They didn't see it as some kind of empty gesture. They thought it had substance. Let me go to Sayeeda. Sayeeda, what have you noticed in terms of the big gestures, political or otherwise, in recent weeks? What's caught your eye? I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, the taking of the knee by so many different politicians, and politicians who choose not to take the knee, has been interesting as to how people interpret that. And I think the Game of Thrones reference by the Foreign Secretary was probably one of the most unusual references to why people were taking a knee. But I think probably for me, it has been the number of journalists and media outlets who've been blanking out their Twitter handles with the kind of black dot, and various other kind of organizations who kind of seem to have suddenly discovered that there is racism out there. And you kind of think, well, you know, it was your job to be reporting on these issues, and a lot of the time you reported on these issues in a way which made matters worse. So the fact that you now feel like you're coming to the issue, and you feel that just by putting a black dot on your Twitter handle somehow absolves you from everything that's gone before, has been I think for me, has felt quite cynical. But I suppose I'm not against gesture politics. I think symbolism is important, and if it's the start of something more substantial, and if it's the start of an acknowledgement and a journey to say we have got things wrong and we're going to do something about it, and that then leads to real action, which makes a real difference to inequality, which is what this is all about in the end, then I'm quite happy to say, well, that's fine, that's the start, and I can acknowledge that. Because in the end, look, we're all on journeys, and I think if we start to knock people who do suddenly arrive at this space and want to start a journey, then we're not really going to make progress if we don't allow people to have that journey.
Okay, so you are as cynical as Evadney, but you see gesture politics as sometimes a force for good as well as a force for hindering progress, maybe. We'll develop that in a bit more detail, maybe, during the next 45 or so minutes. But Sunder, what have you noticed? And you can be cynical if you want to be, or you can cheerlead the gesture that you've noticed.
Well, like Sayeeda, I think gestures and symbols start conversations, and they can be good conversations, they can be unhelpful conversations. If the only conversation we have about racism is about statues, that would be a shame. But, you know, I'm interested in statues like everybody else, as long as it's not all we talk about. As somebody who was missing sport quite a lot and who grew up with sport, the different ways this has played out as sporting gestures have caught the eye, and it's felt very different. I think the footballers clearly wanted to do that themselves and made that happen. The West Indies cricketers kneeling with a Black Power fist as well. That's a powerful gesture with a lot of history. When you see the Formula One drivers all sort of lined up, standing, kneeling, it felt rather forced. It felt rather artificial. You felt that people didn't want to be there. So I think people can make gestures either because they want to or because they feel they have to. But we do want to ask this question of what comes with the gestures. What else follows on from this? And I felt a lot of the corporate statements really slightly said it should never need saying, and of course it doesn't, but for the avoidance of doubt, let us also say we think Black Lives Matter. And what came out of that, I thought, was we don't really know any black people, but we really feel we should now. And so I thought there was a sense of distance really from issues of race and racism from some very liberal people, maybe in industries like publishing, that wanted to be on the side of a moment, but really were feeling, well, we've got to even just make a start now. So I think that's when you ask the question, will something follow from it? Because gestures are good if action follows.
Okay, well, let's look at one or two organizations which have put out big gestures, but where perhaps something concrete is following from that gesture. So although Evadney was cynical about the BBC, £100 million over a period of, I think it's about 3 or so years, at a time when they're making
10 years.
At a time when they're going to have to make some pretty deep cuts. Some people were delighted about this. Now, Sky News, or Sky, in their campaign, which is quite eye-catching, said, "We see, we hear, we commit." And they've pledged £30 million to improve BAME representation at all levels and to support anti-racism charities and to use the power of its voice. ITV today launched its diversity master plan. Evadney is still smiling. And they say from increased on-screen representation to middle management to race and inclusion training. Concrete things they say they're going to do. Now, do you think, and also Channel 4 has launched a 6-point anti-racism plan. So do you think in the jargon, Evadney, that is performative, virtue signaling, or is there concrete behind that? Is there meat on the bone? Because some people are saying this hasn't quite happened before.
I think, I don't want to sound that I am totally anti all of these, and I really don't believe any of these gestures will have any lasting impact. I think, Henry, why I brought in the BBC is that I've been, as I said, with the BBC. I've worked with the BBC for nearly 30 years. And we have seen gestures. I mean, okay, this is 100 million, but it's over 10 years. I personally want to be able to see that these things are more than gesture. What I am heartened by with the campaign, the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment, is that it's a worldwide movement that is a movement of people, not just Black people, but people who have said, we have seen the injustices. We're saying also with the Black community, enough is enough. So all I'm saying is that's fine. I have no problems with these gestures, but what I want to see is that they become concrete. Netflix have also, and I think from the Black community's perspective, they've actually been supportive of Netflix for a long time anyway, because they feel that Netflix have been putting on programs and commissioning programs that they relate to, as opposed to the BBC. Now, I'm sick to death of special projects. I'm sick to death of we need to do another training scheme for these Black people who clearly aren't up to scratch yet. Why are we not up to scratch? Did we not have the same qualifications that they've had? Did we not go to the same schools, the same university, have the same level of experience? Why then, whenever we are needed to be considered for promotion and for equal treatment, we need another scheme. We need another training program. I just think we've had enough of training programs. We need to be able to be allowed to grow on that job, be allowed to make mistakes.
Are you talking then about concrete proposals like, I mean, we've had targets in the past, real appointments. The question is, where does that come from? Because BBC people will always say, we've got to promote merit. Yes, targets are good, positive action, but it has to be on merit. It has to be based on experience. And if people aren't there yet, we've got to train them so that they can take on the responsibility. And they said that in all industries, the police, in corporate finance.
Yes.
I just think that's just greenwashing. Oh.
And this is the problem, Henry. Everyone has used that excuse for holding us down, whatever sector we're in, whatever professions we're in. Oh, well, we're only appointing on merit. Don't make me laugh. You're not appointed on merit, because if you were appointed on merit, there would be more of us in those positions, because we have exactly what they have. So stop telling us that we are not good enough. And that's why we now need to retrain you. I've had enough of it. We've done it over and over again. They say you need to have this qualification. We go out there and we get it. They say you need to have this. We go out there and we get it. And then the goalpost is moved. And then we're still not. It used to be, I've been in race equality for a long time. It used to be that, oh, well, we're not getting the applicants. They're not applying. We don't know where they are. Now you're not using that. Now you're telling us that, well, we're appointing on merit. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Let's pause for a second, because recruitment, retention and promotion is one thing, but you did start off your remarks by talking about the money, the £100 million over 10 years the BBC is going to invest in its diversity fund. Let's focus on money, on both sides of the Atlantic, Sunder, because I was looking at what's happening in the States. You talked about this being a global thing, Evadney, it's true. Bank of America, $1 billion US, $1 billion green for programs supporting communities of color over 4 years. That's small business, health and housing. Goldman Sachs, $10 million US for organizations fighting racism, and they'll match employee contributions on top of that. PNC Bank launched a $1 billion fund to empower African American and low-income communities. Do you think, if things are not to be seen as an empty political or other kind of gesture, they have to put money where their mouth is, Sunder?
Well, all of these things are steps in the right direction, in the sense that while it's too early to tell about any initiative, the question is, what will you do close to home that is in your power, that is in your organisation? Don't tell us about the fact that you can't do more because of things that other people in society haven't done. So that's got to be the question. I think the question of meritocracy is a good one to take forward. We know from the evidence that while there has been quite a lot of progress across generations, if you send in the same CV and then you change the name and you put an ethnic name on it, the interview rate will fall. So all of these institutions that are saying we want to do the right thing are currently part of a system where that doesn't happen. How do we crack that? It's as important. It's great to fund capacity for communities that hasn't been there, but it's important just to sort out your own systems. Now, I don't think people know why that happens and what they can do to change it. Lots of people have got diversity schemes.
Why that happens? You talk about they don't understand why their organization is whiter and whiter the higher up you go, and why there's a high turnover of people from African, Caribbean, Asian communities, why there's a higher disciplinary rate against those recruits, those graduates, those police officers, for example. Yes, what can they know?
I think they don't know, partly because there's a generation gap here. And so the boardroom is very white, but feels it is making gradual progress. The graduate cohort entry group is very impatient with the scale of progress that is being made by very liberal institutions that haven't managed to crack it yet. But what they don't know is why, because they're trying not to. Why, if you've got the name Katwala or Warsi, will you have to send in more CVs than if you've got a name like Smith or Jones? And therefore getting hold of why that won't be true next year or the year after or 5 years. A brave thing to do would be for everyone with a big graduate round to put the fake CVs in, and then to give feedback to the organisation and to the managers. Did you get it right? With the fake CVs, because they were the same CVs with different names? And if you didn't, what's going to change? If people knew that was there, maybe they'd pay attention to every CV and be trying to control whatever it is in those intuitions or biases that are doing that. That's the one piece of evidence we've all got, that we know something's not fair, that we all agree isn't fair. So, for the university admissions, the law firms, the graduate recruitment schemes, they've got to show us, I think, in public, how will they make sure that they're on the case of how that changes? That's more important than their community social responsibility. Welcome, though, spending millions of pounds is great, but it's fixing fairness for your institution is the core test of what you said you'll do.
All right, I'm going to go to Sayeeda now. We're going to talk about politics for a moment or two, but before we do that, let's just quickly raise a couple more examples of money. Lloyd's of London and the brewer Green King, you may be aware of this, they've pledged to make payments to black minority ethnic groups. Lloyd's, as we know, played a major role in ensuring slave ships and cargo in the 18th and 19th century, while UCL has discovered that Benjamin Green, he of Green King, held 231 enslaved Africans and got major compensation during the abolition process. I'm wondering, Sayeeda, are you encouraged by that? Because big organizations haven't done this in the past, even though organizations, community grassroots activists have said, you got rich from slavery and you haven't paid any reparations. But now in the wake of George Floyd, they're starting to do so.
Yeah, I mean, as you saw, Henry, I was nodding along to what everything Evadney and Sunder was saying. You know, these are kind of stories that we can all see over time, the excuses that are given as to why people are promoted. But the specific question that you asked me, Henry, this is all positive. Why? Because first of all, we're talking about it. I have teenage, well, actually, my kids are now in their 20s, and they're saying, how come we were never taught this at school? How come we haven't heard about these stories? I think those of us that grew up in the 70s and 80s were still aware of the Black Civil Rights Movement. We remember Nelson Mandela being released from Robben Island. We remember the kind of Truth and Reconciliation post-apartheid. We were racially aware, I think, in a way that sometimes I feel that my children are not. They've lived in a slightly different world. And I think the fact that they're now questioning why they were not told about these things at school. I mean, I'll give you two very specific examples. My daughter was talking about Noor Inayat Khan, the young woman who went behind enemy lines in World War II. Why were they never taught that at school? When they were talking about genocide, they were saying, why were we never told about the genocide in Srebrenica? This happened not so long ago, in the 90s in Europe. You know, why were we not? Exactly. And what they seem to say is that there's a whole sanitization of history and teaching and curriculum that's happened, which basically means that before we can even start to argue about where we want to be, we haven't even worked out where we came from. So the fact that we're now having a debate about where we all came from and the mistakes that were made in the past, and an acknowledgement of that, we can only genuinely move forward. You know, there's a huge debate, isn't there, in politics to say, well, every nation has had its bad moments in history and we can't keep beating ourselves up about it. Nobody's asking us to beat ourselves up about it. We're all part of this shared British history. What we're saying is let's acknowledge what happened to therefore move forward, because until you start to acknowledge the root causes of some of this structural and systemic racism which still exists in today's society, why certain images are still used, why certain words are still used, we're not genuinely going to be able to make progress going forward. And that's got to be more than gesture politics. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that we talked about was that, you know, there was a terrible massacre that happened during the British Raj in India called Jallianwala Bagh. Some of your participants, and indeed I'm sure Sunder and Sunny will be aware of this. And the particular individual in the military who was responsible for this was stripped of I think it was his honor, or was it his pension? And the House of Lords reinstated it. And one of the things that I said was that surely in today's House of Lords, where you've got people like me and amazing people like Simon Woolley and other great campaigners who have come through the House of Lords and you know, on the issue of racial justice and speak on this, surely it is time for the House of Lords to start to acknowledge the role we played as parliamentarians, or historically Parliament played in reinforcing bad. And therefore, I think there are things that we can do which go beyond gesture politics, which is a way of acknowledgement, is part of the truth and reconciliation of our history.
One of our viewers has said it's General Dyer
was
responsible for that tragedy. I'll call it tragedy.
It was a massacre. Listen, it was a massacre of unarmed, you know, men and women in close. And when I was a minister at the Foreign Office, I visited Jallianwala Bagh, and the moment where effectively the people who were massacred there were, you know, part of the community and ethnic group that I belong to, and the people that were involved in massacring people there were people that I was now representing as a minister for my country. So look, all our histories are now intertwined, and we have to find a way of coming to terms with that, not in a way of blaming one group of people against another, but by acknowledging this and then moving forward from that.
Right. And let's stay with the political response. I'm going to invite you, Sayeeda, briefly to contrast or compare and contrast the political response, i.e. from Downing Street and Parliament, with what the corporations have done, because corporations, as we know, have come out with their diversity plans, some of which you might think are laudable, others you might think are just gesture politics, and then parliamentarians have struggled to find the right language. So we know that Sir Keir Starmer is now going to take inclusion training because he described the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement as a moment, and we have the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary and the Health Secretary, all of them in the House of Commons saying, of course, Black Lives Matter. And then the Prime Minister has announced a new government commission on racial equality, or inequality, just 2 years after the Theresa May race disparity audit reported, and 3 years after the Lamy review into the criminal justice system reported. I'm going to invite you again to contrast what corporate Britain has done with what political Britain has done. Who do you think has made the more meaningful gesture, and whose gesture do you think is empty?
The cynic in me says that both sides of the argument make the right gestures which suit their interests. And corporate Britain has woken up to the fact that there is a corporate market out there which isn't wide, and it includes black people and brown people. And unless they get their act together, they're going to be losing market share. And so much of this work, I'm sorry, is just a pure financial calculation. At the same time, political Britain makes a decision as to which kind of votes are going to get it over the line at a general election. And therefore, I think sadly, there are sections of my party, and it gives me no pleasure in saying this, who know that African, Caribbean, black people in the United Kingdom are the least likely group of people to vote for them as a party. Pakistani origin, Bangladeshi origin are the next least likely group of people to vote for the Conservative Party in a general election. And so, therefore, you know, do black votes matter? Do Bangladeshi, Pakistani origin votes matter? No, they don't actually, because what we showed at the last general election is that we can win general elections as a Conservative Party without those votes mattering. And therefore, if those votes don't matter, then are you genuinely going to be committed to those people and those lives mattering? And I think, you know, look, this might not be what people want to hear, but, you know, being in politics for as long as I have and being in business for as long as I have, in the end, it's the bottom line that counts. And that bottom line can be financial, or that bottom line can be votes and general elections. I think this commission that's been announced by the Prime Minister is a complete nonsense. We do not need a commission to tell us what the problem is. We know what the problem is. There has been review after review, you know, the Lamy review, the race disparity audit, the McGregor-Smith report. Look, there's a plethora of them just over the last 5 to 6 years. We know what the problem is.
So why is he doing
need to see action.
Why is he announcing
I think it's what's politically known as kicking it in the long grass, right? It's about not dealing with the problem right now, hoping it will go away. It'll be, you know, let's talk about COVID for now, then we'll talk about Brexit. And then in a few months' time, everybody will have forgotten the fact that this was an issue. And therefore, you know, we don't need to deal with the daily protests and the issues that we're seeing at the moment. It is horrible to say that. It is horrible for me to admit that, Henry, for somebody who's been involved in racial justice work all our life. But it's also why it's important for us to create solidarity amongst different groups right now and stand united in the way we did in the past. You know, when I was at university, I used to define myself as black. Many of us growing up at that time used to define ourselves as one group of people with a shared agenda. And I think hopefully through this Black Lives Matter movement, we can actually start to get back into that space where we all stand in solidarity on these issues.
It may happen, Sayeeda, it may happen. Just thinking, Evadney, when you look at the political response and this new commission, I think it's going to start, I think, later this year. I think the commissioners are currently being recruited by Munira Mirza, who's the head of the Downing Street Policy Unit. Stop giving me side-eye, Evadney, stop giving me side-eye. I suppose, I don't want to use the word cynical. How encouraged are you by this, by the fact that the Prime Minister has felt he's at least got to do something?
I could not agree with Sayeeda more. This is stalling. It's a tactic to kick this to the long grass. It's a tactic. We, unfortunately, as a people, and at this stage, I'm talking about us as Black people, they have seen us get angry about something, but they know within a few months, we generally calm down and we get on with it. And I think that's what they're hoping will happen. If we say we are going to have a look into this and have some kind of investigation, they've done the same with the Grenfell Towers, and God knows when that is ever going to come to any fruition. We've seen it with the Windrush scandal. And then when they do issue a report, they try to bury it and they don't put anything of significance in it. And I honestly do not have any hope that this is going to be any better. People are already upset about the names that they hear of who are going to be involved in this research and how committed they are to really get into the crux of this. And I don't think it's going to happen. I really do. I hope I'm wrong, because I hope that there's a turning point in the campaign and in the fact that people do want to see a change, a long-term change. So I really hope that people will. My thing is that I keep saying we need to keep this going. We cannot, I do not want to see people demonstrating and causing and having disturbances, and then in a few months we have not achieved any long-lasting positive change. We have to really look at what it is we want to see happen and hold these people to account. So I'm not really impressed by it. I know that this is the way not only governments, but huge bureaucratic organizations work, is that everybody has to carry out a report. Let's just ensure that if the government does carry out this research, we hold them to account and we make sure that something significant comes out of it.
Thanks, Evadney. Well, Sunder, perhaps you might agree with this. Isn't one insurance policy against an empty gesture, an empty political or corporate gesture, the fact that we now have a determined group of people out there on Twitter, on other forms of social media, who are looking for receipts? That's the term people use, receipts. If you make a claim, if you say something about your organization, I'm going to hold you to account and I'm going to look back at your track record and call you out on it if you're found wanting. And that's what happened with L'Oreal and Monroe Bergdorf, remember? When they faded to black. And then she said, hang on a minute, you got rid of me for calling out white people are racist. And look what happened. They reappointed her. What do you think, Sunder?
Yes, and if you want to draw up the scorecard, actually, it's very clear. Political Britain has done more and better than corporate Britain has. And corporate Britain should start to catch up with political Britain. I'll give you an example. 2009, we had 1 in 40 MPs were from ethnic minorities. Last December, we were up to 1 in 10. It's the kind of change towards representing our society that we want to see. Never had an Asian woman in the Commons until 2010. And so there's been progress there. There hasn't been the progress in backroom politics and special advisors that we've seen in front of house politics. That might be a clue. There hasn't been the progress in the media. The political lobby 10 years on is less diverse than it was 10 years ago because a couple of people changed jobs. So there was no effort in those jobs that aren't recruited as there was in the one that was in the ones that are somewhat more contested, however difficult it is. There's very, very few boardrooms in Britain that are as diverse as the cabinet. And that's true of major charity boardrooms as well as FTSE boardrooms. And so, you know, we've got Asian chancellors and home secretaries coming out of our ears, it seems, like London buses. And we still never had a British-born ethnic minority chief executive of a FTSE 100 company. There've been Black and Asian chief executives because they've been a chief executive in France or Africa or America, but nobody has ever promoted from within. And so there hasn't been the progress that we would now expect. And what this moment is about, and I think Keir Starmer can call it a moment, even if he had to go to training over it. It's a defining moment or a passing moment that can be squandered. This moment is about a shift in expectations where doing a little bit better than you were doing in the 1990s isn't a thing that this generation want to hear. This generation have got a birthright expectation of equal opportunities in Britain. They don't want to hear they're doing a bit better than their grandparents were doing when they came off the Windrush. And corporate Britain hasn't caught up with that and needs to. And probably having 65 Black and Asian MPs, Labour, left-wing, right-wing, centrist, whatever, actually could help to put other institutions now under the scrutiny. As are they going to now start to match the diversity of the country that they're.
It's interesting because when I started this phase of our discussion, I was inviting you to say that corporate Britain was leading the way and political Britain was falling behind, but Sunder, you flipped it upside down. So thank you for that. We're just over halfway through, and I'm getting a lot of questions and statements and comments. Please keep them coming. And this one here from Villanan says, I find racism issues cropping up during Trump and Modi period more, as I feel there's a strong instigation by the governance of these politicians. In India, we face issues of dominance, of Hinduvata. Okay, that's, you know, talking about what's going on in India there. through the 21st century. And then we've got Lara, former BBC staffer Lara Paulson. Hello, Lara. And she says, I totally agree with Evadney. And I'd want to add, I don't think the BBC needs to invest all this money. It's not about money, it's about mindset. The BBC domestic news service, for example, in the COVID build-up, ran deeply patronising and frankly racist reports about how basic African health systems wouldn't cope with COVID, unlike us in the UK. Thank you. And she apologises, sorry for a bit of a rant, but I get so annoyed about it. Then Leslie says, it's great that big companies and banks are pledging funds to help generate change. I'm sure their motivation is real. But are there any good examples of how such funds can actually be used to create cultural change? As Evadney and Sunder note, good intentions do not necessarily translate into change mindsets. So how do we do better with the resources that are now available? How do we do better, Evadney, with the resources? And keep the answers brief, please, because there is more coming.
You should know that this debate is going to be one that brings out the emotions. Hot. I've listened to what some of the comments, and I'm looking at them on the chat as well, and I can't agree more. As I've said before, I just think that right now it is about a real and a committed desire from both corporates and from political to do better. We don't need all this money. I'm not saying that we don't need all this money. I shouldn't even say that. But it's not about the money. It's about real and committed desire to treat people fairly and to get rid of the injustice. We haven't even got time to go into all of what's going on, because this thing runs endemic throughout society and through the criminal justice system, education system. We just need to have people from the top who are committed to real change. And I think once that happens, once people say, yes, we've recognized the injustices and we want to make a change, throwing money at the problem doesn't help. And that's what's happening, I feel, almost right now. Everybody's throwing these huge figures that we can't even comprehend out there. But what is going to be done with them? What's the long term?
Well, Evadney, some of these organizations like Stopwatch, for example, or the African Caribbean Leukemia Trust, whether it's in healthcare, on policing, especially policing, let's remember how all of this started with the murder of George Floyd. These organizations need money. And I remember Matthew Ryder QC saying on air, I think it was on BBC elsewhere, if you want to do something, corporate Britain, start off with giving money to these organizations. So they're doing that. But it's about
that would be my thing, is that be focused and clear. As you and I know, the African Caribbean Leukemia Trust, for instance, have been going on a shoestring and on what people give. Come on, put the money where it can have the biggest impact and long-lasting impact and lead to changes.
Yeah. This next question thank you, Evadney. This next question has to go to Sayeeda, and it's from an anonymous attendee who says, is Munira Mirza the right person to lead the number 10 strategy / audit on race disparity? Well, it's actually a commission, isn't it, Sayeeda? Oh, you're muted, I think.
I was going to say, if I had £1 for the number of times I've been asked that question over the last few weeks, I'd be a millionaire.
Well, that's perfect answer.
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't like to make it personal, and I also don't think that it's right. And people can criticize me for this, but as a woman of color, the challenges we face to get to where we get to, the last thing I want to do is then target and single out another woman of color. But the issue that I will raise is that I raise this as a generic question. One of the problems about being at the table and being in 2010, I was the only non-white face around the cabinet table. And I had a choice to make at that time. I could have done what so many of us do when we're the first in through the door, pretend I was white, create as little noise as possible, hope I can just melt into the background, don't be the token brown or black person, don't be awkward, and really not make people regret the fact that they put me around the table, right? And there are so many of us, whether it's in corporate Britain, in politics, where when we walk through that door as the first person, we think, how do I need to behave? And I took a decision, and maybe it was the Yorkshire in me, that I just decided from day one I was different, and if I didn't bring my difference to the table, what was the point of having that chair around the table? And it was difficult, and I don't, it was it's not unknown that I was seen as difficult within government for the views
you've
that
written
I
a book about
held.
it, so.
Well, exactly, and the challenges. And I think one of the things that we can call out, and this is not about one individual, but there are a number of people in public life now who come from the Black, Asian, minority, ethnic background, who for some reason feel like they have to be even further off the kind of center ground on these issues than they need to be, and that concerns me, because ultimately, if you understand racism and you then deny racism, and then you say things like, well, if we start reporting racism or monitoring racism, we'll have more racism, then you're so naive about these issues. And I think that it is right. And the worry I have, and I've seen this within politics, is that when you reach a certain place, if you are prepared to reinforce the problem, and if you're prepared to go along with the status quo, then unfortunately my view is that you're not dealing with the issue, you're being a useful idiot. And in politics there is no point, and I consistently say this, whereas it's wonderful, I think, as Sunder says, that so many more people from ethnic minority backgrounds are in politics, and so many more people from ethnic minority backgrounds are now getting into the top jobs in politics. But when they get there, if they do not understand, or are not prepared to reflect, or are not prepared to challenge and represent the majority view of Black communities or Asian communities or whoever they may happen to be, and I'm not saying be a representative for them, but at least ensure that that viewpoint is heard at the table, then really have we made far more progress? Because is it then just simply window dressing?
Yeah, is it just gesture politics? And I've got a couple of messages here. This one from Johnson Imoud, who says, Sayeeda, I have a lot of respect for you, how you've spoken out on Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. What was the penny drop moment, as some like me have struggled to see the party in any positive light on race or non-CAV views? Brief answer.
I don't think there wasn't a penny drop moment. I've known for throughout my political life in the Conservative Party that that we don't have a great history on issues of equalities, and that's not just in relation to race. It's the same on gender, it's the same on LGBT rights. But I ultimately believed, and still believe, that there cannot be a whole political party which large communities just vacate on the basis that they don't speak for people like me. Ultimately, people like us have to be there and speak like people like us, and eventually make them believe that there is a space for people like us within that party. So I think I would still say to people, don't write off political parties, and ultimately you are going to disagree, but stand your ground and continue to disagree.
Answer this in a word, Sayeeda. This is from Nirmal. Have you felt like space invaders in position of authority, like a space invader?
I don't, you know what, does this mean I'm completely out of touch with culture? I don't understand that. Explain that to me.
I can't go in.
You can't. I don't know anything about space invaders.
It might be an imposter syndrome thing. Who knows what Nimal is asking. Here's another one. This one, let's have a look. Is the term BAME, or as some people irritatingly say, BAME, still the right terminology? Sunder.
Yeah, I don't like it at all as a term. And I hear people saying, we're so delighted to have you BAME people of talent. Thank you for bringing your contributions. But let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. We need good statistics. And in this country, we've got good data on ethnic diversity. There are probably massive ethnic disparities on COVID in France, but they don't know what they are because it's illegal to collect the data. So we need a category for statistics. But the word BAME, it's for HR departments that don't want to use the words white and black to use these acronyms. And we should respect how people identify. People identify as, in my case, Irish Catholic, half Indian, half Irish, English, British, etc. But we then need statistics, and the overall statistics can be useful. And really, in education, in jobs, you need to dig down into this. And of course, what Black Lives Matter is about the fact there are specific barriers for Black people that might not be faced by some Asian people. There are specific barriers for Asian people that are Muslim that are not faced by Asian people who are not Muslim. So let's not throw out having a statistic, but let's not talk about people in language that nobody understands or recognizes.
All right, Sunder, I'm going to follow up with this one from Luke, who says, do any of you worry about gestures backfiring at all with the public? I'm thinking right now about the White Lives Matter Burnley play, remember that banner? and anecdotal conversations with people talking about all lives matter, etc. Briefly, if you would.
I think you've got to deal with the discomfort there is. I mean, people saying white lives matter, that isn't going to represent a lot of people in Burnley, but that's an issue of racism in that town. I think this debate about history and identity could go wrong, because there are lots of people out there, like my in-laws' neighbours in Billericay, Essex, who probably think that Black and Asian people want to bring down a statue of Winston Churchill. I did an experiment on Twitter to ask ethnic minority respondents only who wants to bring down a statue of Churchill. 2 people did out of 100, and the others didn't. But you wouldn't know that if you were reading some of our newspapers. So I think we've got to be really careful where there's no contact, where people are getting an absolute caricature of the agenda. We've got to go and make people have the conversation face to face and listen both ways about what this is and isn't about.
All right. Just to let you know, Sayeeda, Nirmal has come back again. This is a person who discussed Space Invaders, and he says,
I need to go off and Google Space Invaders now. I'm probably either showing my age or my lack of understanding.
Well, I first played Space Invaders back in 1979. Very basic technology. Space Invader, as a body out of place in places of power you are not expected to be, and you are not considered to be the ideal body in that position due to race stroke gender. That's why. Maybe imposter syndrome is the other term for it, maybe. Or... To
be fair, Henry, I've been in that space all my life, as a young lawyer in the legal kind of space, as a woman in business, often in a kind of male-dominated environment, as somebody in the Conservative Party, as somebody in politics. So, but I for me, the imposter syndrome was less of an issue. I didn't feel like, maybe it was the Gumption, the Yorkshire Gumption. I didn't feel like it was their space that I was occupying.
Yeah.
I felt like it was my space that I needed to occupy fully as my authentic self. And that's the difference. So when I speak to a lot of young politicians coming through, I always say to them, be the true version of yourself, because otherwise it becomes a very unhappy place to be. And I think we've just got to give young people the confidence to be able to say you can be the true version of yourself when you get to these places, rather than just hope that nobody will notice that you're not white.
Very quick follow-up, this from Faz. Will Rishi, as in Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, be the first Asian PM?
I really hope so, and I think he's got the ability to do so. And he's got, it would just be a real moment of celebration if we saw that. And maybe if we got Rishi like we got Obama, we may end up with something horribly bad after that. But I think just to have that watershed moment would be worth having.
All right. This one, Clara, I'm going to divert this one to Evadney. Given that the BLM, as in Black Lives Matter movement, has raised person issues, what does the panel think that the BLM movement should do next? This is interesting because a number of organizations have taken care to divorce the wider movement of people marching up and down cities, towns, and villages from the actual core activist organization. And there's even a fallout between some groups who claim to be the keepers of the dream and others who claim to be, claim that they're imposters. Who knows? Evadney, what do you think? What should the next steps be?
I think the next steps personally I think what they need to do is strategize. I think that the BLM movement obviously began before George Floyd, but George Floyd, Breonna, and others have really kind of brought people together. And I think it was to deal with that moment in time and that injustice. Now we see that this has led to a marked change across the world. And it's now that we need to strategize as to how we're going to develop this. We're going to make sure it leads to lasting changes. So whether that be we focus on, in this country at any rate, changing the curriculum, educational curriculum, so that children start learning history and understanding our role within that, or whether it be, as what has been happening now, is people talking about reparation. And I don't mean reparations as in individuals getting money. That's never been a thing for me, because I just think that's not going to work. I think it's about, we've been paid up until 2015, we were still paying the slave masters. We need to be looking at how we are going to develop those countries and those peoples that have suffered as a result of that. So I just think for me, the BLM now needs to really strategize. It needs to look at what does it want to achieve in the next 5 years. I don't want us, people are, you know, sadly, people are going to get, there are going to be more deaths like George Floyd. This is not going to be the end of it, but that cannot be all that it's about. It really has to be about developing long-lasting changes. I don't want to see the next generation out there protesting the same things again with the same banners.
Thanks, Evadney. Lots and lots of messages coming through, both directly on the Q&A and also on the webinar chat. Thank you very much. Keep that chat nice and lively. This is from Esther Amar, who joins us from Accra in Ghana. And she says the new phrase for gesture politics is statementism and tweakonomics. Corporate Britain is invested in protecting its bottom line, its profit margin. And she also says Black people don't have time to wait for white minds to change. They are literally dying. The metric for change must be different. And the consequences for a failure to make substantive change must affect the single bottom line. And then we have Miranda, who says Miranda Clark, large parts of the charity sector and third sector needs to change and become actively anti-racist, as do organizations allocating resources and funding. Lots more questions coming through as well. And we have this from Michael, who says, since we're on about racial prejudice, what about such within BAME communities too? Let's have a proper discussion on this too, as it's not a black-white issue. Maybe that's for another discussion. We're really talking about gesture politics and whether or not that's hampering progress towards the kind of society we want to see. I'm going to have to wind up very shortly. I'm just wondering, Sunder, where we go from here, because I feel reasonably optimistic this evening from the discussion we've had right here, not least because there are so many different ways now of holding to account those organizations that make noise. For example, a statue will come down in their city and they say, we're going to really think about this and do something about it. And if it goes quiet, people then go on Twitter and say, what are you doing? We want to know. Is it going in a museum? Who's going to be put on the plinth to replace them? We're seeing a discussion happening up in Glasgow as well, up and down the country. Are you optimistic about the way forward?
I think we should be optimistic about the opportunity. What's come out of Black Lives Matter and anti-racism more generally, lots of different things will happen. Nobody's going to own it. There's going to be different things to activist groups in criminal justice, to Premier League footballers, to graduate recruits in corporations, to people pressing for change in the BBC. That's all for the good. What we've got to do is have specific content that's relevant in Britain to the specific things that people want to see change. The specific challenges for Black people in Britain are going to be different from the specific challenges in America. And it's to say to organisations, don't just show solidarity and empathy, make the change that's close to home. And here's what it is. So every major charity, no more all white boards by the end of next year. Who can't get there? If you can't get there, tell us what the argument against that is. So I think more specific things, there'll be radical versions, there'll be moderate versions, there'll be mainstream versions, but actually as long as we're all pushing for actual change to follow up gestures, I think we can be optimistic we'll get somewhere.
Closing thoughts from you, Sayeeda. I'm just looking at your face. You look optimistic. Am I reading your face right?
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Henry.
I said, I'm looking at your face, and from your smile, you look optimistic. Am I reading your face correctly?
Yeah, I'm optimistic, but I'm also really pleased that my, middle class kids or my kids and people like me who were involved in the fight for racial justice and equality, whose kids were starting to live very comfortable lives, have been woken up again and reminded that there is a world out there that they too need to be a part of, and that really this battle goes on. So on one level, I'm pessimistic that this generation is still having to fight these battles that many of my generation thought that we had fought and possibly made real progress and maybe even have won. But on another hand, I think it's a really good moment for us to rethink what battles still exist and how we need to work together to make sure we overcome them.
Thank you very much. And closing thoughts from Evadney. I suppose people can see beyond the gesture and they're now ready to see the action. You're on mute, I think.
Absolutely. I agree. And I hope people didn't think I meant that we shouldn't have these gestures, because I think it is more complicated. I just think we need to hold them to account.
And people are looking for receipts. Evadney Campbell, Sunder, Katwala, and Sayeeda, thank you very much. I'm now going to hand you back to Sunny Handel from Open Democracy. Sunny.
Thank you so much for that, Henry. Really enjoyed that. I love that debate. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us in this debate, all the fantastic panelists and all our audience and all the people who posted messages in the chat. We have a weekly debate at Open Democracy. You can check our website and social media every day, every Thursday at 5 p.m. We also have a weekly newsletter, and you can sign up for that at opendemocracy.net/newsletter. Open Democracy relies on contributions and donations. So if you want to see more public interest journalism like this, please support us. And you can support us by going to support.opendemocracy.net/donate. So I just want to say thank you again for joining us today, and see you hopefully next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.